They used to. They're going into the countries that are outlying areas, strategic areas where they can control import and export, and they're destroying the governments in those countries to ensure that the person who is running that little area, and it may seem insignificant to you and I, but if they are putting that much effort into it, it's important. And they make sure that their guy that they put in there is doing their job. Now, I thought it was funny that in Egypt, Mohamed Morsi was put into power, and a year later he was fired. And now he's going on trial. Because that's what it means when you get fired. When you play that sort of game, it has all kinds of consequences. See, Bill Gates wants to facilitate consequences because he knows it opens the door for more monetary opportunities. You and I stay away from consequences because our parents and everyone else around us who had an assumed stance of authority because we believed that they were an authority told us, don't do this or that's going to happen, don't do that or this is going to happen. So we stay away from consequences. We follow the line. Wealthy people, CEOs, they create consequences because that opens up opportunities. And then they can make more money, or they can make contacts, and it'll lead them to other people that they can create other consequences with, and on it goes. The consequence of what's going on in the Ukraine and in Venezuela right now, and what is going to be brought to a theater near you here in the United States, is the new foreign policy for the United States. And people say, well, if they're doing it over in other countries and they're trying to gain control over those other countries, what would be the purpose of having it done domestically? The purpose of having it done domestically is that they can change the entire government structure in one shot. It's a lot easier.
Maybe,
think about when you
can I
go ahead.
also bring an element in here? Of course, we're talking about the institution of the world government. Now, in order to have a world government, you need to have every single government in the world on side with it. Ergo, whichever government is not on side with the New World Order, I think will wind up having these little quote-unquote revolutions, won't they? They'll have all these little manipulative things, and they'll wind up having all of these dictators and whatnot put in power who are probably just as much at the behest of the World Bank and IMF and globalist New World Order as anybody else. And it's the only way they can actually make it work is by eliminating their competition. It's like a corporate takeover.
It is. And it's fueled by this little marketing tool that they figured out a couple of decades ago, and I'm kind of downplaying it a little bit. It's been around for a while. It's that all-seeing eye in the pyramid. That is a brilliant marketing strategy. Never show weakness unless it is advantageous to your sales pitch. They put that out there. They don't give you information about what it is. And then they decide to give you a little bit of information, but it's sort of kind of like that idea whose time has come. It's sort of open-ended, and you can finish their sentence if you'd like. In fact, most people have finished their sentence. Most of the ideas that we have are not based in fact. They're based in supposition and theory. I hate to break it to you guys, but just because someone shows up at a meeting does not mean that they're doing anything nefarious. It means that they have shown up at a meeting where nefarious actions are being taken place or being plotted. But there's a difference between having evidence of wrongdoing and assuming that there's wrongdoing based on association. And that's where the waters get muddied. And that's where good information gets thrown to the wayside. And that's why mainstream media has turned into disinformation and gossip columns. And unfortunately, other sources of media have taken that model and used it as well. It's a lucrative model. It is an extremely lucrative model. It makes rock stars, it makes celebrities, and it works well for everyone. And so if they give you this symbol and they put it out there, and everybody's got instances and stories and theories, and there's some truth out there. I'm not saying that Satanism and child endangerment involvement with Satanism does not happen. It absolutely does. Absolutely it does. But the answer is a lot simpler. And it's really, really easy to see. Everyone, when I started writing in alternative media, and everyone was talking about the RFID chip being implanted in your hand or in your neck or in your whatever, I thought that was ridiculous. I still do to this day. The reason why I think it's ridiculous is because as an investigative journalist, when I look and see what's actually happening with these corporations that are using RFID chip, they're doing something different. See, it's just like Catholicism. There's a version that everybody else uses, and there's a version of it that they use in Vatican City. And the guys down at the bottom who are tithing and participating in Catholicism, they don't know what's going on over there because it's a different version. It's like the mystery schools. It's a different version. What you see is one version, and it's a big distraction, and it keeps you in line, and it makes you feel certain things, and it makes you do things on impulse, and it makes you react. And that's fine, because as long as you're doing all of that, you're never going to figure out what's going on over here. While everybody is worried about getting implanted with an RFID chip, nobody's paying attention to the fact that it's in so much of our jewelry and our watches, and it's not just in your phone anymore. Google is coming out, and other companies as well. I've written about this twice in 1 week because the trendy new RFID wearable technology jewelry, and it's out there. And people are buying it left and right. Just like they ran out and bought the Apple iPhone 5S 2 weeks after it came out that the NSA was spying on us and using trunk identifiers and metadata in order to do so. And here were these people who bought this phone and used their thumbprint or their first fingerprint or their palm as identification. Well, we know that the NSA is tapping into our phones. So you're going to hand them over your biometric data? Yes! And you're going to spend $300 in order to do it? Yes! Why? Because you're their customer. You're a lifetime customer. You might see it in the news, but it's not real. This over here is real. You know, it's sensational. It must be real. They put this video out and then they take it away. And then some people can only find it in certain places. And you do this on purpose. It's to create scarcity. It's to create an uproar in the audience, in the customer base. That, oh my God, certain things are happening. Whether they're happening or not is inconsequential. The truth, out the window. What you believe, what you are personally invested in, that's what matters. So someone that you're listening to can tell you to your face that they're lying to you about how many bankers have died, and you won't even hear it because you think that they are an authority and because you are personally invested. And so you're constantly picking and choosing information that validates your opinion, validates your belief. Because if you come into contact with information that does not validate your belief, then you have to reassess your own personal paradigm. And very few people take the time to ask themselves who they really are. You know, it reminds me of right in the middle of the never-ending story when a character Atreyu goes to look into one of the mirrors in that blizzard and sees that he is the character, the little boy reading the story. That's his reflection. That's who he is, and he runs away screaming. It's because we have a trouble facing who we really are, because who we really are is not what we think. We are constantly wearing a mask. We're constantly pitching ourselves to each other, validating. That's what a date is. It's a job interview. It's a begging session. Will you love me for the rest of my life? Sure. I don't know you, but I'm in love with you. That's what we see in the movies. People go through some traumatic incident and then they're all of a sudden in love. What they don't tell you in the movies is that there's an adrenaline rush and it's mixed with chemicals in your brain that are sexually make you sexually charged. I'll put it that way. It's not love. It's that you're really glad that you didn't die and you happen to go through it with this person. And so now you have this bond with this person. And in about 3 or 4 weeks, when they really get to know you or you really get to know them, you're going to realize that that idea that you had about that person is not who they are. And you're going to feel disenfranchised. And so you're going to break up with them or divorce them after, X amount of years. You're going to go through a crisis, leave your family. Because you made a decision a long time ago that you didn't really mean because you were under the influence of one of four things: drugs, alcohol, rage, or fear. And you were making an emotional decision about your life. And we do this with the job. We don't create the
Well,
people that we want to be.
well, to a large extent, you're right. I think that the things that happen to you actually create the person that you are, and it's kind of like your way of how to deal with it. I was talking with a couple of my friends who dropped over last night about doing this broadcast, why I do it, and that kind of thing, and am I playing the victim? And I said, well, you know what? Actually, to a degree, yes, I am a victim of the system. Okay, however, instead of doing nothing about it and just whinging about my victimhood, I use that trauma as a tool, as a motivator to go out and expose scumbaggery, right? To make sure, or at least to help in some way, any way that I can, that people who are potentially the next victims of the system perhaps won't be. And even if they do wind up becoming victims just like me, I'll show them what I have done. I've learned to cope with it, and I've learned to use that trauma as a weapon against those who would traumatize others and hopefully protect people from scumbaggery.
Well, absolutely. That book, From Dictatorship to Democracy, the book in itself, and then the 198 Ways to Topple a Government Using Nonviolent Resistance, that in itself is not a bad thing. It is a tool. Who uses it and how it's used is where the moral, ethical issue comes in. Right now, it's in the control of people who are using it for U.S. foreign policy. That's a bad thing. That means that seriously, and probably as a overall rule, be careful about where you protest and be careful about what you join and the groups that you belong to. Make sure that you're making a conscious decision, because if you're making an unconscious decision, you're constantly in that emotional state. And you know, because you're in that emotional state, if you take a step back and you ask yourself, why was I getting so upset? Or why was I so happy? You'll start to realize I'm being influenced by something that constantly puts me in a state of high intense emotion. And that is directed to a specific goal. The longer they can keep you there, the longer the length of time that they have to get from point A to point B. And there's honeypotting all over the place because they need new recruits. In order to have a full-on protest here in the United States, like they're having overseas, they're going to have to get a large number of people. And so there are people out there right now who are recruiting for this cause, telling people whatever they need to hear in order to get them to go. If they have to abuse the listener, they will. Whatever it takes, whatever base need they have to apply to their pitch to get that product sold, they will do it, and they are doing it. There's a coalescence right now, and it creeps me out because nobody's talking about the day after the revolution, the day that the stability operations come here. The
It's
day that
funny
they
you should
installed.
mention that because that's exactly what I was thinking over the weekend. I heard a couple of people talking about revolution. Maybe they don't realize that the word revolution means to go in a circle, right? And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a Gary Larson comic. Have you ever seen the Far Side series?
Yes.
Funny comics, eh? And says the first guy who invented the wheel, and it's a caveman who's got a giant stone wheel, and he strapped himself to the outside of this giant stone wheel, and he's about to roll himself down a hill and just crush himself over and over again. That's what revolution is, ladies and gentlemen, as the elite would want you to see it.
That is a perfect. That's a perfect visual of what is going on.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to invent a new form of transport. It'll crush me as soon as I start moving, but hey.
It doesn't matter. The day after the revolution, that's not part of the product. That's why they don't talk about that.
Yeah.
That's not what you're buying. You're buying the revolution.
That's the reason why
They
I'm
already
always
got.
tentative about these kind of things. And in fact, I think the New World Order actually have a brilliant scheme about doing things very, very nice and slowly so that barely anybody notices the difference until one day we're all living in freedom and tyranny's been exposed totally and gotten rid of. That would be really quite nice, don't you think?
Well, that the reason why they're so patient, and we hear that all the time, the New World Order is so patient.